I call this session to order. Distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm privileged to be chairing today's high-level structured discussion on resilient design for sustainable urbanization, both in my national capacity as the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of Singapore to the UN, and as the co-chair of the Group of Friends for Sustainable Cities. From the many disasters and calamities around the world, and the UN's preoccupation on the post-2015 development agenda, it is timely that we are having this discussion today.
You do. You ask the question. The green tie. Your name, please.
Is it going to work? Okay,
yeah.
It works. I am Quijano. I'm from Princeton Day School in Princeton, New Jersey. I'm a student. My question for pretty much everybody on the panel, you can hear me, right? Okay.
Closer to the mic is better.
Okay, my question for everybody on the panel is, this has been stated already, I know, but in short, compare and contrast, resilient design and sustainability. Just in a short statement, what do you think?
That's a great question.
Got a great answer.
Sure. So that's a great question, and Fiona took a stab at it earlier. I think one of the ways to think about it is sustainability doesn't have to mean this, but it has, of the past decade or more, come to have a real focus on efficiency, which isn't a bad thing, but efficiency tends to squeeze out redundancy, and then that undermines resilience. So there's a lot of potential complementarity, but that's where the complementarity breaks down, and for me, in that we've been pushing the idea of resilience or sustainability has become, for a lot of people, how to do more with less, and squeezing all the slack out has left us much more fragile and much more vulnerable than we used to be, and therefore less resilient. That's one key distinction that I think we're in the middle of a corrective on. But there are others, and I'm going to pass to Fiona.
So Nancy is absolutely right. Much of the work that we have been doing with sustainability and sustainable design is about trying to find multiple purposes for one thing rather than finding multiple ways of doing the same thing. And what I sort of ran by before is I think that where we've thought about sustainability, we've thought very much about preserving and maintaining for the long term, and about reducing our load on the natural ecosystems, the energy, the water, not imposing big loads with waste. Those things, in many ways, are very much reinforcing of resilience ideas, because you are trying to do more with less. But the problem is that if you then size your systems so that you only do more with less, you don't have a system that is big enough to deal with something that happens, some shock or some stress that you weren't expecting. So I think sustainability, we kind of have tended to assume that everything is going to stay the same, whereas I think if you take the resilience point of view, you assume that everything is going to be different. And when you do that, you actually answer a completely different question in a completely different way.
I'll pass the mic in 1 second, but I want to add a comment. The language that we're using broadly is changing along with everything else. What sustainability meant 5 years ago, what it means today, what resilience meant. Currently in the parlance, there's a new word, regenerative design. I'm not going to take the time to discuss regenerative design. I'm going to suggest you Google regenerative design, where something online will discuss why there's a kind of progression that's moving from resilience to that, which was mentioned earlier about whether you bounce back to where you were or whether you bounce back differently, so that you can deal with issues and challenges that didn't exist before. With that, I'm going to...
I'm just also going to point you to some differences in, I guess, the ways cultural interpretations of these change from places to places. For instance, I think if you go to a country like India with a tradition of Gandhian thinking, where you have So the word sustainability fits much better with a desire for low consumption lifestyles and lifestyles that are closed circle. So it's a different way of looking really at the world, which is very complementary to resilience, but slightly different.
That's a fantastic question, by the way. It's probably the best question today. I really, and I actually will have a slightly darker answer to that, and to say that, to suggest that sustainability a decade ago was suggesting a hopeful solution to something, a world where we want to pass on to generations what we had today, I would suggest it's darkened into resiliency, because we know we're on a path. And that path is not great, and we're seeing these effects right now. So I wouldn't, it's not an optimistic answer just to suggest that there is a slight sense of urgency around answering that question. It's a great question.
There's another way of looking at this, is that you look at the way how we use the words. So not only what they are, but the way they have become meaningful in the way we do things. And then adding to what Nancy said is that, well, sustainability was almost about the expected and reducing the complexity, while resilience is about the unexpected and enlarging or embracing at least the complexity. So resilient could be about too much, while sustainability is always about as little as possible. There's a story on Berlin in World War II that was addressed as very resilient. Berlin was bombed in World War II, but on every so many blocks there was a water pump. It wasn't planned in the city for a war. It wasn't planned for a disaster. It was not planned for the idea of building resiliency. But it helped citizens to survive, and it actually helped a city to survive. So resilient is about the unexpected, so you cannot plan for it.